This was going to be my biggest dive trip of the year to photograph seals and seabirds, especially underwater. We only had until the 23rd of May to get these shots, and the success of this trip was riding on the weather.
See, we're approaching Lundy. For those of you staying on Lundy, your luggage will be crate across onto the jetty and taken up to your room.
Lundy is widely regarded as the best place in the world to dive for grey seals. And it's known for having excellent visibility, at least by UK water standards. And this is especially true during the warmer months of the year. Contrary to the opening scene, the weather has actually not been good at all recently. In fact, this is one of the UK's wettest Mays on record. Another storm rolled in as we went to explore the island, but the forecast for tomorrow was good, and we needed to find where the puffins were to take advantage of the good light in the morning. There was a lot of activity at the colony, but we were really struggling to find a good spot to photograph puffins. Having found several seabird species and a brief glimpse of the puffins, we headed back to camp to sit out the worst of the weather. Unfortunately for me, my tent was leaking, and I even managed to pick up a sunburn for my troubles. With the arrival of the break in the weather, we headed out to try and photograph the apparently elusive puffins.
Yeah.
The only problem with our chosen site for the puffins was that the sun rose on the other side of the island. This meant that we'd be shooting in the shade, but this may have actually worked to our advantage as we'd already missed the softest light of the morning. We made sure to walk along the paths as we didn't want to damage any of the burrows of the nesting birds. Once we arrived at the location, it was just a matter of sitting down and waiting and seeing if they were going to turn up for us. After lunch, we began the roughly 70-metre descent to go diving with grey seals. This was particularly tough as I was carrying almost 20 kilos worth of uncooperative baggage, though I did get a little bit of help after this. It was a little bit late in the day to be diving with seals, but we had seen a few around and a couple in the water, so we were hopeful that we'd get the opportunity to swim with them. Unfortunately for us though, the recent stormy weather had destroyed the visibility in the water. This was not good photography conditions. And the seals were nowhere to be found. So we turned our attentions to an unlikely subject, the moon jellyfish. We were disappointed with the water and not seeing the seals, but in hindsight I'm actually grateful for the opportunity to photograph a different species that I may not have done unless everything seemingly went wrong. This turned out to be a huge silver lining for me. We ended up going back to our favourite spot in the hopes that we could photograph the seabirds in a colourful sunset. But as the evening rolled on, we began to lose hope of any decent light appearing. A bank of low cloud by the horizon snuffed out any of the light, and this cloud was the edge of the storm that was due to hit in the middle of the night. To make matters worse, we received a message saying there was now the very real possibility that the boats that we'd booked for 2 days of diving at the weekend were now going to be cancelled.
Having to prop the tent up with my back. It's just broken in the wind.
We were due to leave the island today, but the storm meant that the seas were far too rough to be travelling by boat. This would be my first time in a helicopter, so the bad weather was potentially giving me a pretty magical experience. We spent the rest of the day resting in preparation for the long journey to Pembrokeshire in the morning. Just before we were about to set off, we received the worst news possible. The most important part of the trip had now been cancelled. After this devastating news, this meant that our only chance of any underwater photography was if we went diving from the shore. Despite the storm, we set off for Pembrokeshire, and despite what Google says, this took us well over 7 hours with the traffic. We arrived at St Ishmael's by about 6:30. We went out for some food, and then went to sleep.
I mean, the annoying thing is there probably is an octopus in the area.
Once the weather had cleared up a bit, we headed out to check on the water visibility. Yesterday's storm had really churned up the water, and unfortunately the viz was so bad it just wasn't even worth getting in. We left the beach disheartened again, but we quickly came up with a backup plan.
This isn't going in your film, mate.
Yeah, it is.
Oh no. I
This is Pengelly Forest. It's part of the largest block of ancient oak woodland in West Wales. Surely this would provide us with some great photo opportunities. It has to be one of the most diverse and lush forests that I've been to in the UK. However, the animals weren't playing ball and the photography wasn't going well. So there was only one thing for it. We took our time to enjoy where we were and enjoy being outdoors. Despite the day being a photographic failure, we were still enjoying ourselves. Besides, we still had one more day to try again for photography. Unfortunately for us, the bad weather had returned, and it didn't stop raining until the evening. We ended our trip staring at the islands we should have been diving at this weekend. This is where our boat should have been taking us. Although this wasn't the outcome I'd been hoping for when I set off on this journey, I had come away with some photos I was happy with, and most importantly for me, I'd spent the week outdoors, doing what I love doing, with my friends. So this may not have been my most successful photography trip, but it was definitely a successful experience.